Welcome again to Data Beats. If you haven't already, do subscribe. Today, the Chief Martech, Scott Brinker, who I believe needs no further introduction, is here to help us understand how Martech is becoming data first. So here we go. Hey Scott, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Of course, so excited, Scott. First question for you. Please tell us, how is Martech becoming data first and what is causing this shift?
Yeah, it's a great question to kick us off. Obviously, like data is embedded in all Martech. All Martech is essentially digital, and everything digital is driven by data. But I think for like the first, 10 years or so here, like a lot of companies, they were thinking less about the data component of it and more of just the actual functionality. Like, how do we learn these new channels? How do we run these new programs? How do we run these new campaigns? And there was always data involved in that. But now that we sort of have the services that we're actually executing here are becoming, more mature. We understand them. Really now where we're understanding the opportunity to get more leverage out of those services is by getting better with the kind of data that we are feeding into these. I'm sure we'll go into this, but there is an infinite amount of data, inside our companies, available through partners in the second data, party world. We don't even have to go to third party data, and we have more data than we could possibly use at this moment. And so I think it's a really exciting time for MarTech professionals to be up leveling how they think about what data they can use and how they can use it effectively.
100%. So, do you think MarTech tools will soon become data tools, and the ones that don't, do you think they'll become irrelevant?
Yeah, again, going back to what we were just chatting about, at some level, every MarTech tool has to be a data tool. But I think it's fair to say that, okay, some have had relatively basic data capabilities. A lot of MarTech tools, when they first got created, were very siloed. They had their own little database of, oh, okay, well, here's what's happening inside this tool. But they weren't necessarily as aware of, oh, well, what are the other signals that are happening, outside of our tool that we should be aware of? As we have engagements and activities within our tool, are we making sure we're passing those signals and information further downstream to others? And so, yeah, I think you see now that a lot of the innovation happening in Martech is really happening around having better data in and data out capabilities. And then, of course, you're like, okay, as you get more data in, how do you like even have inside your tool better abilities to apply it
Yeah,
to the particular capability of that tool? And so, I think you're right. If a Martech tool doesn't keep up with this movement, yeah, they seriously risk falling into irrelevancy.
got it. Cool. Now, as the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, you have an insider's view on the most pressing needs of GTM teams. Based on what you've seen, do you think GTM teams generally care about the technologies that are used to solve their problems?
Well, I think one of the things we've seen across marketing, sales, customer success, partner management, partner ecosystems, is all of these teams have ops professionals. And some of them are now being aggregated into these revenue ops or rev ops teams. And because leveraging digital capabilities and data has become so fundamental to everything our go-to-market teams want to use, these ops teams have really taken on the massive responsibility of making sure they actually have the capabilities to deliver, on what the rest of marketing, sales, customer success want. Now, the inside the ops team, I think you'll have people who yeah, are very savvy about the tools they're using. This is a big part of their job is both, managing the existing tool set, understanding how it's evolving, but also evaluating, other new capabilities that they bring into the stack. I think as you get further away from the inner workings of the ops team, yeah, the rest of the organization is less concerned about the specific technology and more about like, hey, can you deliver the actual, program capability campaign, that I need to deliver my results?
100%. So, since you talked about ops teams, what are your thoughts on the gap between data teams and non-data teams? Do you think ops teams are suited to like beat this gap?
Yeah, and this is one of the things where there's a wide spectrum
Yeah,
inside, the ops, profession right now. I mean, I would say
yeah,
all of them are relatively data savvy. That's
right,
sort of a core part of what ops is about. But the truth is, when you're talking about how you're harnessing this data, it's not just about being savvy about data. There's increasingly these capabilities that come to things like, I mean, data engineering. How are we piping these things? How are we, managing data, not just within these specific application silos, but across the enterprise more broadly. And as you get deeper and deeper into that, I mean, this is some highly sophisticated work. I mean, speaking of ops professions, right, there's a whole universe of what we would call data ops, people who are specializing in this. So I would say most marketing ops and revenue ops people probably aren't that savvy. They're not data ops people. They're not data engineers, but they know enough about what they need to do with the data, and they can help wrangle it, from the business side to kind of serve as the bridge between, yeah, really the data specialists in our organization, and then, yeah, all the rest of the business users who, yeah, just want to see it applied.
yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you on that. So moving on, right? The rise of data warehousing has sort of completely changed the Martech landscape by introducing these new technologies like reverse ETL and warehouse native apps. Do you think these have the potential to completely replace the way Martech tools are being built and sold?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I've been writing a bit about this here over the past couple years, where in many ways, I think the Martech stack, kind of grew up in its isolation. And the reason was, very logical. Like, digital marketing in many ways was moving faster than the rest of digital transformation inside an organization needed to move. And so marketers, this is part of why they built marketing tech and ops teams, is because they had to implement more capabilities, frankly, ahead of what the rest of the organization was willing to do. Well, fast forward here a decade, and now, yeah, I mean, every organization is going through, it's become cliche to even call it digital transformation. It's just, these digital capabilities are now being baked in, to the entire organization. And as a result, the mission is changing, where it's no longer about like, hey, this nice, isolated tower of the MarTech stack. It's about like, how do our marketing activities and capabilities interface to the broader technology infrastructure that the company now has, specifically around data. And so this has been the most exciting space, as you see, this data warehouse layer, is increasingly becoming like a foundation upon which, frankly, every department inside the organization is both able to contribute and also pull value from. So yeah, integrating the Martech stack with the enterprise-wide data layer is probably the most exciting thing happening in Martech right now.
Okay, okay, got it. Yeah. So now let's talk about data integration technologies. We've got ETL, ELT, reverse ETL, iPaaS, and CDP, right? Do you see a future where companies keep paying for multiple data integration tools and technologies?
We've got this challenge throughout the MarTech stack where there is definitely overlap across different products and different categories. And I suspect that overlap is, probably going to grow, more, just given the nature of how companies expand. Um, in some theoretical world, you would say like, oh, well, I don't want to pay for any overlap. I want, this one thing to do this, and there's a very nice neat boundary, and then this other thing that will do the other thing. And I mean, I think that is an aspirational goal that we can head towards. But today, inside most organizations, you have overlap, and that overlap is actually useful because depending on the particular way you're wanting to do something, it might be easier, faster, or cheaper, to
Yeah.
do it through one product versus the other. And having a little bit of optionality and flexibility in that can be beneficial. That being said, it's kind of like the Occam's razor of Martech stack is, you want your stack to be as simple as it possibly can be, but no simpler. So do you really need an ETL, a reverse ETL, an iPaaS, and a CDP? Probably not. But again, it really does depend on the specific structure of, yeah, what's happening inside your organization.
Yeah, and a related question here. Many organizations today continue to use iPaaS solutions for ETL and reverse ETL workflows. And few people understand iPaaS better than you do. So, what are your thoughts here? Do you think iPaaS can fully be replaced by warehouse centric data integration technologies like ETL and reverse ETL?
No, and I think that's probably a good example because when you look at the leading iPaaS players, one of the things they do is they tend to offer a range of use cases, and so like supporting data pipelining, ETL, reverse ETL is one of those use cases, but another place where you actually see them tend to promote more of their functionality is almost this ability to create business workflows at the application layer, crossing different apps, crossing different departmental boundaries, which is something that, yeah, ETL and reverse ETL really doesn't, yeah, even have in its picture, And so I think that's an example where you typically see, yeah, in theory, some people are using an all-in-one iPaaS for both their ETL work and their like business workflow management. Then I think more often now you're probably seeing cases where the data pipelining starts to be a fairly specialist set of capability, a lot of innovation, a lot of change happening in that space right now, and then the workflow side is still like a massive, opportunity. We still have barely scratched all the possibilities there. So I wouldn't at all be surprised for a lot of companies to have both ETL and that sort of iPaaS workflow-ish capability in their stack.
True, true. Yeah, I think so too. You've made a ton of predictions over the last few years. If you had to make one about reverse ETL or warehouse native apps, what would that be?
Yeah, so I'm always cautious in predictions, just because, yeah, was that the Yogi Berra or someone like, predictions are hard, especially about the future. But that being said, I think the sophistication of the data warehouse layer is advancing incredibly rapidly. There was a time when the data warehouse was really nothing but dumb storage. It was basically like, yep, we just put it there, and then if we actually want to do anything with it, oh, okay, well then we have to like pipe it out into different apps. And that process of piping was, slow and expensive, and you ended up like duplicating data all over, the universe. I think what we're seeing is, as this new generation of cloud warehouses, as they continue to advance, it's more and more about saying, well, hey, there's probably a whole bunch of activities of things you want to do with your data that you don't actually have to pipe it out of the warehouse to do that. That we can sort of keep, the physical storage, if one still considers there to be physical storage in the great mythical cloud, but like we sort of keep the data in place, but now we're able to actually, conduct, activities on it, do manipulations to it, almost in a kind of virtualization of things that we had to, shove it somewhere else previously before we could get access to. This is an incredibly powerful direction. Like I think there's a ton of innovation. I think it also, raises a ton of complexity questions. And we were talking earlier about some of the hardest work associated with data isn't the mechanics of the data. It's the things around like the agreement on the models, the agreement on the governance. So in some ways, yeah, having all that stuff inside the one core warehouse probably makes the tech mechanics in some ways a little bit cleaner,
Yeah.
but also like raises the bar on like, okay, what are the operational processes we need to put in place to effectively do that without it just turning into chaos.
Well, awesome, Scott. It's been so great having you on the show. Thank you so much for answering my questions. Last question for you. Do you have any tips for companies evaluating data integration technologies that we just discussed?
Yes, if at all possible, actually get a free trial, pilot program, whatever it is. Like plug it in, make it work. When you are getting demos, the can demo is nice, but so much of this comes down to like how easy is it for a particular technology to work in your environment. And so I think just being really insistent on like proving that out, as part of the acquisition, product acquisition process is generally sound advice.
Help bridge the gap between data people and non data people. Join us on databeats.com.